Buongiorno e buonasera a tutti voi. Bentrovati, sono lieta di accogliervi.
Hello, good evening, everyone, and it's a pleasure to have you here. I would just like to give you some technical indications, and we have our control room in Rome, and we have started our international streaming service in Italian, in English, in Spanish, and in Hungarian. For every language, there is a YouTube channel which we are following directly. For this reason, we would give you the opportunity to interact with us. So please write in the comments and write all the questions you wish to ask. Those who are enrolled in the Congress are following from the Zoom platform. In order to be able to listen to translations, you should have installed the very last version of the Zoom platform on your mobile or on your computer. Those who are linked via Zoom should exclusively use chat for any technical questions. So the chat is for technical questions only. You should use the question and answer session, Q&A, for questions which are written for the speakers. So speakers on Q&A. You can book to make a contribution by raising your hand, but you will have to communicate only in Italian and in English language. And I will call people to take the floor during the debate in order of arrival. All webcams and microphones at the moment are deactivated, and all attendees should know that the conference is recorded and will remain online on our YouTube channels and on our website. I hope the audio is okay for everyone, that translations are starting, getting confirmation of that, and the floor to our person in charge, Luca Fiorani, and we have officially begun EcoOne 2020. I wish you a profitable proceeding. Thank you, Valentina. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It is with great joy that we open this meeting with a small introduction as to what EcoOne is and what the objectives of this meeting are. We sometimes think that a spirituality is limited in the four walls of a church. Instead, it has a revolutionary force and a dynamic impact on all the expressions of human life. And this applies also to the spirituality of unity of the Focolari movement founded by Chiara Lubich, who already in the 40s of the last century dreamed new art, new politics, new science. And she had the mad dream that the gospel would have renewed all aspects of society today. Nearly 80 years after that beginning, we have Sofia, the University Institute, Scuola Abba Study Center, and some cultural initiatives such as the Economy of Communion, the political movement for unity, and of course, EcoOne. EcoOne is an international network of teachers, professionals, researchers who work in environmental sciences and want to complete their technical and scientific skills with a reading in wisdom of ecological problems. At the moment, it's not a mass movement, but it is present all over the world. This conference sees attendees from 5 continents, including the islands Wallis and Fortuna in the Southern Pacific, just close to the time change zone. Even if EcoOne has a concrete inspiration, its program is not so much in formulating technical solutions to environmental issues, but in developing, in dialogue with people of any belief, a culture of ecology where the role of every person in nature is not exploitation as a master, but stewardship through a loving administration. EcoOne started in 1999 following the initiative of Chiara Lubich and Sergio Rondinara, nuclear engineer with great ability in theology and philosophy as well. Since the year 2000, we have seen 14 international meetings on environmental themes. This year, we would like to examine the impact of the encyclical letter Laudato Si and develop new routes towards integral ecology. Since 2005, the path of EcoOne is inspired by the message that Chiara Lubich read to that meeting on that day, and I will begin a quotation from it. For the charism of unity that God has gave us, we have always seen creation in its wonderful immensity as one, coming forth from the heart of God as love, God who has impressed his mold on it. We perceive the presence of God beneath things, so that if the pine trees were gilded by the sun, and if there was a refraction of light from the brooks, and if the daisies and the sky was celebrating the summer, we seemed to have a stronger vision of a sun which was below creation. We saw in a certain way, I believe, God supporting things. And in this was for every man and woman, for humanity, the flower of creation. And as a consequence, we saw that everybody had been given as a gift to those who were close to them, and those who were our neighbors were created as a gift for us. On the earth, everything was in a relationship of love with everything else, everything with everything else. Therefore, the human being with intelligence and the wisdom which penetrates mystery should enter in bringing about the one design of God on the universe. Her creativity and work needs to make them participate in the work of the Creator, but we need to be love in order to weave the golden thread among beings. The progress of man is intimately linked to the progress of the environment in which they live and are conditioned. The human being is not the center of the cosmos. God is. Let us not dare go against God. We would find death if instead the final goal of humans is not economic interest or egoism, but love for other human beings and nature. With its contribution, the earth will be transfigured until it becomes the earthly paradise. End of quotation. And speaking of messages, I can communicate with immense joy that we have received the blessing of Patriarch Bartholomew and a message by Pope Francis, which I will certainly read to you immediately. It has just arrived. Here it is with its pontifical coat of arms and its gilded frieze. This is in English, the original. I will read the official translation, which we have received from the Secretariat of State. But you will hear the original, of course, naturally, in embargo. Dear brothers and sisters, I extend a warm welcome to all those who are part of this international conference taking place within the special year devoted to the 5th anniversary of the Laudato Si encyclical letter. I express my gratitude to EcoOne, the ecological initiative of the Focolare movement, and to the representative of the Dicastery for the Integral Human Development and the movement of Catholic Movement for Client, who have cooperated in order to make this event possible. Your meeting with the theme New Paths Towards Integral Ecology, 5 years from Laudato Si, sets up a relational vision of humanity and a stewardship of our world stemming from different points of view: ethical, scientific, social, and theological. In recalling the conviction of Chiara Lubich that the world brings within it a charisma of unity, I trust that this perspective of hers may be able to guide your work in recognizing the fact that everything is linked and that we required a care for the environment which is linked to sincere love for human beings and a constant commitment vis-à-vis the problems of society. Among these problems, there is the urgency that a new and more inclusive paradigm of socioeconomics may come about in order to reflect the truth that we are a single humanity, as a wayfarer made of the same human flesh, as children of the same earth which is hosting all of us. This solidarity amongst us and in the world surrounding us requires a firm will to develop and actuate concrete measures which may promote the dignity of all persons in their human relationships, in their family and business relationships, by combating the structural causes of poverty and work in order to protect the natural environment. Reaching integral ecology requires a deep inner conversion, both at a personal level and a community level, where as you examine the great challenges which we need to take on at this time, including climate change, the need for sustainable development and the contribution that religion can give to the environmental crisis, it is essential to interrupt a logic of exploitation and individualism and promote a humble and simple, sober lifestyle. I hope your work may contribute to build in the hearts of our sisters and brothers a shared responsibility for one another as children of God and a renewed commitment to be good stewards of creation, His gift. Dear friends, I thank you once again for your research and your efforts in collaboration in order to find new ways which may bring us to integral ecology for the common good of the human family and the world. In expressing my best wishes and prayer for your proceedings during this meeting, I invoke cordially on you and your families, as well as your colleagues, the blessing of God, the source of wisdom, strength, and peace. And I ask you, please, to remember me in your prayers. Rome, St. John in Lateran, 23rd of October 2020. This is the message of the Pope. I am certain that using an Anglophone expression, as we're not speaking English here because we have translation, we have received enough food for thought, and that the words of Pope Francis may enlighten our proceedings and address them, direct them. I would then give the floor to Professor Tiziano Longitano, who will moderate this important introduction session on the impact of Laudato Si in the contemporary world. Professor Longitano is following a PhD in theological anthropology, has taught theological subjects in various universities. She is now professor of dogmatic theology in the Urbaniana Pontifical University, where she was in charge of the Institute of Catechesis and Missionary Spirituality. Furthermore, she has responsibilities in the field, for example, as an expert in the Agency of the Holy See for the assessment and promotion of quality of universities and ecclesiastical faculties. Thank you, Tiziana, and always the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I will take my face covering off in our meeting, there seem to be no attendees. The hall is empty, and therefore you are the attendees, and we are pleased to welcome you here in this session of ours and in this first portion of our work. I would like to greet everyone to follow us online. So this afternoon, we're going to have an overview of what the Pope, I'm going to go into detail with what the Pope has said to us from the beginning of his message. You can see that there is this relational and human dimension for the stewardship of our world from a variety of perspectives. This is what Pope Francis was asking us to do. This variety of viewpoints include ethics, science, theology, and it will help us in going into depth. And 4 of our speakers will be able to do so, and one of them is present here among us. We will give everybody 15 to 18 minutes in order to offer them their point of view, and we will use Italian, as you heard mainly, though you will be listening in your own respective languages by clicking on the little icon for translation. I would immediately say to our speakers that if you have any slides, you will be able to share your screen, of course. Now, the first of our speakers, therefore, is over here, Father Joe Strome, Isaac Kuredatam, and I present him briefly. He is coordinator of the ecology and creation sector at the Vatican Dicastery for the promotion of integral human development. He has a chair of philosophy of science, and he is director of the Institute of Social and Political Sciences at the Salesian University of Rome. He has been a researcher at Oxford University, where he is a visiting scholar, has been a visiting scholar since 2011. His most recent books include Creation in Crisis, Science, Ethics and Theology, The Philosophical Root of the Ecological Crisis, The 10 Green Commandments of Laudato Si. At least this is just to quote a few. Over to you.
Yeah, ascolteremo volentieri. Grazie. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. My presence here from the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development is an expression of the appreciation of Cardinal Peter Turkson, our prefect, and the entire Dicastery for the great collaboration that we receive from the Focolare family in putting Laudato Si into practice. So congratulations for having chosen a very appropriate title for your conference, New Ways for Integral Ecology. Our session is trying to evaluate the impact of the encyclical Laudato Si 5 years since its publication. And I would like to begin with the first slide of the words of the professor from New York State University, Dale Jamieson, who, as soon as the encyclical came out, spoke of Laudato Si as the most important environmental text of the 21st century. Now, that was hardly 2 weeks after the publication of the encyclical. Now, that is a prophecy which has come true. Today, 5 years later, sorry for some technical troubles, we will overcome it straight away. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So the words I mentioned of Professor Dave Jamieson of Laudato Si as the most important environmental text of the 21st century. And this was reconfirmed in a study that came out in a scientific journal, Biological Conservation, last summer. You know what the scholars did? They made a study of Google searches of interest on environmental issues, and they found the interest was going down, but somewhere around 2015, the interest started spiking again. And they did some research, and they attributed, this is a scientific journal, you know, imagine. And they attributed this growth of interest to the publication of the encyclical Laudato Si. I would like to share with you this afternoon just 5 points, you know, undertaking the evaluation of the encyclical. First of all, speak of the paradigm shift that Pope Francis has brought about with the publication of Laudato Si. A second point will be how the encyclical became a game changer, and I will refer especially to the Paris Climate Agreement. A third moment will be rather critical. Some challenges that we need to accept. And fourth point will be signs of hope, the emergence especially of a people's movement from below, and new avenues, new ways, and here the challenge of participatory action. So the first thing I would like to share with you about this change of paradigm, and Laudato Si has brought about a change of paradigm, at least in two senses. For decades, we spoke of the environmental problem, environment as something outside. And Laudato Si has this beautiful subtitle on care for our common home. Pope Francis is reminding us that, you know, Earth is not just matter, it's not even just nature, that Earth is our home and it is our common home. And we do believe that was a major paradigm shift. And, that's what the first photograph of our planet, that we are a home, this blue-green jewel, that in the vast universe, this may be the only place that we can call our home. And the second, paradigm shift is Laudato Si has gifted us with an integral ecological vision. Now, 5 years later, maybe we take it for granted, integral ecology, but it was not there before. It is thanks to Laudato Si that we speak of integral ecology. And that beautiful paragraph from Laudato Si, number 66, easy to memorize, 66, when Pope Francis tells us that human life is grounded in three fundamental and closely intertwined relationships, that we exist in relationships with God, with our neighbor, and with the earth itself. Now, this is integral ecology. And that is the reason why the cry of the earth is Laudato Si 49. The cry of the earth is also the cry of the poor. We know that for decades there were people who were concerned about protecting, polar bears. It's an important thing. We need to do that, exotic species. But we forgot about the poor. Or we had social activists concerned about the poor, but not concerned about the environment. Laudato Si tells us this is a false dichotomy. These are closely connected, they're intertwined. It is the same cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. So this is the first point I would like to make in terms of assessing the encyclical, that it has really changed the paradigm of speaking of our common home. And the second point is this, the Laudato Si has been a game changer, and we saw it in Paris. Laudato Si was published in the month of June, and allow me to quote Pope Francis. He and his team, they were working on the encyclical for several months, and already in the month of January, while he was on the plane flying from Sri Lanka to the Philippines, he told the reporters, that there is some time between the publication of the encyclical and the meeting in Paris. That is said in January. And the encyclical was published in June, and the Paris summit was in December, as we know. So there was time, and Pope Francis wanted to influence the outcome of the Paris Agreement. And allow me to say this, last year, Ban Ki-moon, the former UN Secretary General, came to Rome, had a meeting with Pope Francis, and the afternoon, he came to our dicastery. And he just told us, I told Pope Francis, Your Holiness, thanks to you for Laudato Si. The day you published Laudato Si, I told my staff in New York that thanks to this document, in December, 6 months later, we are going to have an agreement in Paris. So Laudato Si has been a game changer. And the second element is just not at the political level, because Pope Francis in Laudato Si invites everyone for a dialogue, his own words. I urgently appeal then for a new dialogue about how we are shaping the future of our planet. So all people of goodwill are invited. And I would just think of at the interreligious level. We said Laudato Si came out on 17th of June. Already by the end of June, the Jews came out with a rabbinic letter on climate change in New York. 2 months later, in August, the Muslims came out in Turkey, in Istanbul, with the Islamic Declaration on Climate Change. A few months later, the Buddhists came out with the Buddhist document on the Buddhist climate change statement to world leaders in October, and the Hindus, they came out with Bhumi Devi Ki Jai, a Hindu declaration on climate change. Now, within a few months, how Laudato Si was able to stimulate all that. So the impact of Laudato Si is huge. It has brought in a paradigm shift. It has been a game changer in the political, interreligious, educational, economic, and various levels. Let's now take a critical look. 5 years after Laudato Si, where are we today? To remain at 1.5 degrees centigrade, global emissions should have gone down by 7% every year. They have gone up by 5% or so from 2015. From 1972, Earth has warmed 0.2 degrees centigrade. Today is 1.1 degrees centigrade. And by the end of the century, we won't reach, as things stand now, 1.5, but we will reach 3.5 degrees centigrade. So has Laudato Si made a big difference? I think the fault is not Laudato Si's. The fault is that paradigm shift is still to take place, and we need to work on that. We have an economic paradigm that puts finance, money in the first place, and as you can see, the balance is tilting, and we need to change this paradigm. Another critical moment is we are reaching crucial tipping points. The Greenland is melting, and scientific community tells us 4 times faster than what we thought a few decades ago. And we know that the Greenland alone can raise sea levels by 6 to 7 meters. And also many other tipping points. We have at the Amazon Synod, the African monsoons, the coral reefs in Australia, and very alarmingly, just last month, 24th of September, Nature, the most prestigious scientific journal, came out with this cover page. It was on the Antarctic, telling that even West Antarctic, which we thought was stable, is now becoming unstable. And the title is Point of No Return. Global warming pushes Antarctica towards irreversible ice loss. So where we stand today is we see the physical tipping points and also the social tipping points, the inequality, and this is our world today. Over more than 800 million of our brothers and sisters not even able to have a meal a day. And the COVID is going to add another 100 million people to this group. And this study came out 21st of September, just a month ago. saying that of all humanity, the richest 10% of humanity, something like 630 million people, accounted for 52% of the cumulative emissions. Imagine the richest 1%, the global inequality, having contributed to something like 15% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. The middle class, 40% of humanity, have contributed something like 41% of the cumulative emissions. And the poorest, 50th, the other half, they were responsible for just 7% of the cumulative emissions. So imagine the first 1% contributing 15%, and the other half, not even half of that. So this is the world in which we are living in. The global apartheid, we have two worlds. On top, we have the map of the world in terms of emissions, and you see the US is so conspicuous, Europe, China, India, also maybe also for the population. And you don't see Africa on the upper part. Downside, the lower part, we have mortality, people dying due to the climate crisis. And Africa is so painfully, conspicuously evident there. So we are living in a divided world, and the current pandemic has evidenced it. It is a zoonotic disease. It has come from our destruction of ecosystems and wildlife trading, and who are paying the price? The poor. So that prophetic cry of Pope Francis, the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor, is even more eloquent today. And to this, we can add a third cry, the cry of our children. And very prophetically, Pope Francis on words in Laudato Si 160, what kind of world do we want to leave to those who come after us, to children who are now growing up? 5 years later, that cry is even louder, because children are telling us. They have descended on our streets, into our squares, and telling us, do not mess with my future. Don't steal my future. And allow me to quote Pope Francis on words when he addressed the CEOs of oil companies in the Vatican last year. He said, future generations stand to inherit a greatly spoiled world. Our children and grandchildren should not have to pay the cost of our generation's irresponsibility. I beg your pardon, but I would like to emphasize this. They, our children and grandchildren, should not have to pay. It is not right that they should pay the price of our irresponsibility. I'm saying this because Laudato Si is not an encyclical to be kept in the archives, that we can celebrate it. It is a prophetic encyclical, and the time has come to put this encyclical into action. And fourth sign is a sign of hope. We see the emergence of vast movement of people, and that is a sign of hope. We see Catholics for Climate Action. We see the youth moving out and children coming together, and that is a sign of hope. And I conclude here again with the words of Pope Francis. We are aware that the cries of the earth, this was in the message for the season of creation, the 1st of September, and the cry of the poor have become even louder and more painful in recent years. At the same time, we also witness how the Holy Spirit, these are very encouraging words, is inspiring individuals and communities around the world to come together to rebuild our common home and defend the most vulnerable in our midst. We see the gradual emergence of a great mobilization of people from below and from the peripheries who are generously working for the protection of the land and of the poor. And the last point is our task. And I don't want to speak much on this. It is the invitation of Laudato Si to bring this encyclical into action. We need what we say in ecological conversion. Time is running out. We have a decade, hardly. And Pope Francis gifted us a Laudato Si year. And this Laudato Si year will flow into a 7-year journey. This people's movement, including families, communities, schools, universities, hospitals, businesses, farms, organizations, religious orders, everyone coming together for the protection of Earth, our common home. So let us begin this journey together. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Grazie, Padre Joe.
Thank you very much, Father Josh. We should like to thank you for presenting this new shift in paradigm, which is an invitation coming from Pope Francis. He offers us with this shift of paradigm an integral vision. And this is not just a theory, but as we've heard, it has echoes, incarnated echoes resulting from dialogue at multiple levels. And this echo has to get incarnated even more in all the sectors and the spheres of our life. So thank you very much, Father Josh. And now let's move on to another intervention from Thomas Insua. Is he connected with us? Could you please let us hear your voice? Thomas, just 1 minute. Here I am. Can you hear me? Very well. So just a few words of introduction. Thomas Insua is from Mexico City. He's co-founder and executive director of the World Catholic Movement for the Climate, and he works to help the Catholic Church to transform the call coming from Laudato Si into a brave action for social justice, for climatic justice. He's been a Fulbright scholar and researcher at our Kennedy School. He's worked at the Secretariat of the UN for the Climate, cooperating for the preparation of the summit on climate, COP21. He's worked for Google in Latin America and in Southeast Asia, and he's played a leading role in a Catholic organization working in the slums of Buenos Aires. So he's concluded a master in public administration, and he got specialized in climatic policy at Howard Kennedy School, and he's got a master in public policies at the University Torquato di Tella. He was raised in Buenos Aires and now lives in Rome with his wife Vicky, and he knows that your wife needs protection in this time of pandemic. Over to you, Thomas, and we listen to you very willingly.
Thank you very much. It is truly a joy to share this event with all of you. I'm sorry I cannot be there with you. But it's a great joy to be able to participate, at least in this manner. So I will share my screen with you. And there are some items which have been already mentioned by Father Josh. But I will start from the political side of things, and then I will talk about the impact of Laudato Si in the Church. And I will begin with the impact of Laudato Si in politics. Mainly, it is interesting that Josh has chosen the same phrase from Pope Francis, which I think is very significant that Pope Francis himself said that, and I'll read the exact phrase, the important thing is that there is some time between the publication of the encyclical letter and the Paris meeting so that it may give a contribution. So for the first time in the history of the Church, this is the second phrase by Cardinal Czerny, who explained it very well. And he said, never before in history the Holy Father and the Catholic Church have thought in such an explicit way about a vast global process, COP21 and the Paris Accord. So clearly From the beginning, Pope Francis wanted to have a direct and clear impact in the world, not only in the church. So this is very important in order to understand how crucial this is. And with the publication of the encyclical letter, we could say that the Church has established an alliance with various sectors, if you will, which in the political debate on the crisis of our shared home, these are groups that normally don't have a very strong voice. So we were talking about alliances. If we want to talk about alliances, a couple of alliances in this debate with the Church and the Pope. The first one is there are some of these groups that Father Josh has mentioned. First of all, they are the most vulnerable communities, those which have been most impacted on by the crisis of our common home. As Father Josh has told us, this is one of the most important messages of the encyclical letter, and it's the Pope asking us to listen to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor as one single cry. And in this sense, it is important to say that it's not just a phrase or an idea, but it's something which is politically very clear. The Vatican and the Holy See, and this is its delegation in Paris. This is Cardinal Turkson with the president of CVS. CVS, Climate Vulnerable Forum, in the Paris conference, there was this great debate on the objectives of the Paris Accords. 1.5 degrees, or is it 2 degrees? And this, in the years leading up to the Paris Accord, there was this debate where the various countries negotiating this process of the United Nations, the most vulnerable ones, the poorest ones, asked for an objective of 1.5 degrees. So it was a matter of reducing to a minimum global warming, in other words. And then there were the richer countries, the ones who the polluting countries, who didn't want this ambitious objective. 2 degrees was okay for them. There was this great debate as to the level of ambition of the Paris Accords, and the president of CVF of the Philippines. The Philippines are one of those countries which are most impacted on by the climate crisis. They were holding this campaign for a 1.5 degree objective as the object of the accord. And the Holy See, clearly this symbol they do it's hard to read. It's 1.5. It's their slogan. So 1.5 is what they're gesturing with their hands at this point. And the Holy See, therefore, strongly in alliance with the poorest countries, Europe, for example, the European Union, the United States, Japan, China, etc. Everybody wanted 2 degrees, and the Holy See said no. We are with the poorest. And therefore, the political impact of this was very strong indeed, so much so that the final agreement speaks of 1.5. There is a sort of a compromise halfway, but it was an unthinkable objective just a couple of months before Paris. And this has also mobilized the Catholic forces in an unprecedented way, I must say. And then I will speak about the Catholic movement for climate. And we've organized a great campaign, nearly 1 million signatures in parishes all over the world on this Catholic petition for climate, 1.5 degrees. So a great campaign of the Church in partnership with the Holy See, if you like, to make our voice heard in Paris, whether with these events with the United Nations, with the French President François Hollande, and together with all other religions. So the church, for the first time, had a very strong voice, one which was very present, along with other religions, asking governments for an ambitious action in that Paris Accord. Great mobilization also in the streets, an environmental mobilization, which saw nearly 1 million people, and many of them for the first time together, and therefore a very strong impact. The church speaking with a very strong voice in this political process. This is the first alliance with the poorest. Second is an alliance with the scientific community. This photo is one of the press conference presenting the encyclical letter Laudato Si. This is Professor Schellenhuber, a German scientist, probably the climate scientist, one of the most important of the three best-known climate scientists. He is an atheist, and it is interesting that he is an atheist. He's at the presentation of the encyclical letter. So the encyclical letter has clearly established a deep alliance with the scientific committee. And the church says, we are supporting this appeal of the scientific community to add with urgency. We know that Laudato Si speaks very strongly about the urgency of the crisis. We are at this tipping point, nearly committing suicide. These are very strong expressions on the part of Pope Francis in order to support this appeal of the scientific community. This is a more recent situation where the scientists began to speak about an emergency. This word was, we're not talking about climate change anymore. We are talking not about a crisis. We're talking about a climate emergency here now. And Pope Francis also used these very words of scientists, and he spoke about emergency. And there are many conversations and messages from Pope Francis where he speaks about the climate emergency. And therefore, I would talk about a clear alliance between scientists and Pope Francis. Number 3, alliance with the youth movements, Greta and the younger people, the Laudato Si generation, the youth movement, the climate strike, another alliance, therefore, with the most vulnerable, those who suffer this crisis most. The Church and Laudato Si have established these alliances. We know that the encyclical letter expresses the concept of intergenerational injustice in very strong terms. Lastly, another alliance to be mentioned, that with indigenous peoples, which, if you like, following the encyclical letter, has been deepened in the process of the Amazon Synod and after the exhortation Querida Amazonia. Once again, Pope Francis was able to support these groups, the ones which suffer the crisis most, and his voice is not always heard in the world of corporations, big industry, and Pope Francis, clearly with the encyclical letter and with his next contributions, has a clear objective to have an impact on this debate, on this process. Therefore, this is the first impact. Then a secondary impact which is linked to is, and I should mention here that in this process, clearly, especially in the last 2 years, there has been we have seen the great conflict we have in Brazil with the indigenous people and the government and the church, inspired by Laudato Si, clearly motivated even more for the process of the Amazon Synod. It has a full objective to have an impact. Secondly, I will mention a specific economic impact too, which Laudato Si had, specifically in the world and the industry of fossil fuels. We know that the encyclical letter has a strong position on these, and we know that fossil fuels are 80% of the problem of the global warming and the emission of greenhouse gases. 80% comes from burning fossil fuels, and therefore the encyclical letter states very clearly the need to move towards greener forms of energy. Other conversations on fossil fuels, there is this famous sentence which says that the Paris Accord clearly recommends to keep the majority of fossil fuels underground. This motivated a great campaign of divestment in fossil fuels in the church, but is linked to a wider ranging movement in other religions, in other situations outside the church. And if you like, this boycott effect to the industry of fossil fuels has had a great effect. Many Catholic institutions have divested, motivated by Laudato Si. At the Vatican a couple of months ago, we saw the publication of a very clear and strongly worded document talking about the need to divest in fossil fuels, inserting them in the category of non-ethical investments, including abortion, weapons, and so on. So very strong words indeed. And this motivated, obviously, one example is in Ireland. A Focolarina, Lorna Gold, who will speak to us tomorrow, was involved in this process. So in Ireland, the Bishops' Conference divested from fossil fuels, and this is part of the work of Caritas Ireland called Trocher, and this helped to motivate and to guide the island's government as the first and only one so far in whose parliament a law was passed to divest in fossil fuels. This was all brought about by the church very clearly, so the impact was very clear indeed. Time is a little bit short, so I will say third, briefly. I know that time is short. The impact of Laudato Si on the church. And I think this is one of the most interesting themes for many of us. One is the deep effect it had on theology and the social doctrine of the church, but I will not speak of this simply because Josh is much more able than I am to talk about this, and he has mentioned a few things already. There are others who can speak better than me about this impact, this clear impact, which has been very deep indeed. I will speak perhaps of some more practical impacts on the implementation of Laudato Si. In the movement, we like to say that we need to live, as it says here, Laudato Si. And these are concrete examples as to how to put the encyclical letter into practice. The first thing I would like to mention is the time of creation, one of those clear and deep and beautiful impacts of the encyclical letter. The time of creation, which we celebrated last month in September, between the 1st of September, the World Day of Prayer for Creation, till the 4th of October, which is the patron saint day of Saint Francis. Pope Francis has given us lots of strength, has given lots of strength to this, to the celebration of this ecumenical time, along with other Christian churches, and it's worth saying that this was truly motivated by Laudato Si. There is an ecumenical cooperation which existed before Laudato Si, and it was in 2016 that for the first time Christian churches more officially started to cooperate, and the Vatican in the last few years, with a lot of strength, the Dicastery for Integral Development, motivated the church to celebrate this time, and it became an annual event. And I would briefly mention the movement because the Focolari movement is a very active member of this movement, and therefore we are very happy that Luca Fiorani, who belongs to our executive committee of the movement, helping us to guide the steps of the movement. It's worth mentioning the movement because it's an example of this impact on the church, because the Catholic movement for the climate is a result of Laudato Si. It was founded in 2015 as part of this Kairos, and 2015 was such a special time, and the issuing of Laudato Si and the Paris Accord, all this was a year with a special atmosphere, something special, a fundamental process both for the church and for humanity. And the Kairos comes about, the movement comes about in this Kairos. It is a global movement with more than 750 organizations and members, and thousands of animateurs, 17,000 Laudato Si animateurs, 6,500 are certified. I know that there are many, and there is a partnership with this is in order to animate local leaders and help them. So it is a different network of movements and lots of animators whom I have mentioned. I'm happy that Josh used the same picture. This is the New York chapter of the movement. So these are some examples of action and concrete transformation. I will say this very, very quickly. First of all, the ecological conversion results. In 5 wonderful years with great results, a spiritual conversion. This was an appeal of St. John Paul II 20 years ago, but Laudato Si brought that message and made it more tangible, as it were, and deeper. So all these initiatives which came about after Laudato Si, I mentioned Time for Creation, the spiritual objectives, circles, retreats, and many initiatives and other to motivate an ecological conversion of the church. And we are already beginning to see many changes and transformations of lifestyle in the church. And this, too, is an important appeal of Laudato Si. And I would say, not yet, but we're seeing the beginnings of some sustainable forms of life. The church has a great ecological footprint. We have lots of real estate, and we need more action in this sense. But there are some initiatives. For example, we have published an eco guide for parishes, and there are other initiatives. There's also what Josh mentioned, the 7-year plans, and therefore there will be more than this. And lastly, I said so at the beginning, the impact, the political impact, the prophetical voice of the church in this debate. So just to close and mention how urgent this is. 5 wonderful years, lots of results, lots of fruits, but these are still not enough. It is extremely urgent, and we are telling students, activists, Greta Thunberg is telling us that our house is on fire in this situation of emergency, and scientists too are telling us that there is a need for this transformation to come about. It has already begun in the last 5 years. We need to go deeper, and we need to bring this transformation to the next level. It needs to be bigger, more massive, and even deeper. And we need to be aware of the fact that there is hope. We would close with this message from Laudato Si, and we know that things can change. Our house is in flames, and as Christians, we are people of hope. We know that after the cross, there is resurrection. After death, there is life. At this point in time where the crisis is so deep and so serious, including the healthcare COVID issues, and we know that as Christians we are people of hope and we can change the world. So thank you very much. Thank you, Luca, for the invitation, and I end here. Thank you.
Soprattutto quello che mi hai fatto capire è che non è una questione di linguaggio passare da cambiamenti climatici a crisi.
It's not just a question of a language. So we have this climate emergency. It's not just a question of a language. It's a question of meanings that have to do with the essence of life. So we have to make progress. We still have to make progress in concrete actions and actions of transformation. Thank you very much, Thomas. Let's now move on to our third speaker. Is a Franciscan friar, Fra Onofrio Farinola. He should be connected with us. Well, yes, I am. I'm connected. So just a few words of introduction. He's a Capuchin. He studied theology at the Pontifical Faculty of Theology, Santa Fara in Bari, in the Apulia region. He has a PhD at the Faculty of Theology of Southern Italy in Naples on the pastoral care of the creation, and he got a joint diploma in integral ecology. This is a diploma that was developed as a cooperation between all Pontifical Roman universities. He's a master as a educator for teenagers at the Pontifical Salesian University. Now, currently, is the secretary of the Institute of Spirituality of the Pontifical Faculty Antonianum in Rome, after having served as the Secretary General of the Order of Franciscan Friars, and he works in many pastoral care activities. Amongst these publications, there's Song of Creatures for Theo-Ecological Pastoral Care for the Safeguard of Creation. There was published in 2020, OSHA, from Lampedusa in the Mediterranean in transition, and this was published in 2020. So you tend to write a lot. So over to you. Over to you. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and I should like to send on a peace and well-being to everybody. Now, the changes of urban centers, progress, but also regression of a society which is more technological and industrialized as a society, the proliferation of industrial centers that are highly consuming, the uncontrolled exploitation of natural resources, the destruction of artistic local beauties, and last but not least, the pandemic of the coronavirus because these phenomena are the signs of a planetary catastrophe that was envisaged, and this is not only urging the scientific community, but also the ecclesial community, as has been seen from what previous speakers have said. So we are witnessing ever-changing situations. Causes and effects are huge, and we have to recognize it. In this complex situation, we cannot deny there's still taste for the beautiful, for beauty, and so the hope, as mentioned by Thomas before. So there's taste for beauty on the part of the church community. The beauty is part of it, and of course this is all too understandable because her Lord is beautiful. And to quote Francis of Assisi, God is beauty. So the taste for beauty is part of the ecclesial community, because every created thing is the image, in the image of the Creator, and it's and every God's reflection is a reflection on beauty. So so we have to focus on the pastoral task of the church with a view to reestablishing the original and creative beauty of God in a world where abstraction, which is opposite to beauty, is invading everything. So it's hazardous for the health of humanity and for Earth that is making us live. Now, the suffering of the world encourages us to focus on the theological and pastoral action of the Church today, considering the ecology. It's not only a question of science or of analysis, it's also a social and church question. Now, in our opinion, change always has a common denominator, which sees in everybody's commitment the strength of change itself. Now, following this approach, Pope Francis, in the encyclical letter Laudato Si, states, and I quote, so there's a great cultural, spiritual, and educational challenge to be taken up, which should imply long processes of regeneration, processes that encourage to adopt, as the Pope continues, and I quote, new convictions, new attitudes, and new lifestyles. For this reason, today, as a pastoral theologian, I wonder, what is the contribution that the Church is making in this vast ocean of reflections which follow one another and include all disciplines, pedagogy, education, ethics, policy. How can the prophetic witness of the Church find a place in this space and time to be grasped, and that we had stopped? We were forced to stop. So where are we with the systematic theological reflection on ecology? But what are the results? What are the pastoral choices that have been made? What is the concrete project that we have developed? Which indications are we able to provide Christians with? Are we able to make them understand how the gospel message can be introduced in a complex context? So we've understood that today, more than ever, there's a need for ecological pastoral care or eco-pastoral care that should be very careful to all the things we are concerned with. But are we aware of the indissociable link between nature and man? What knowledge do particular churches have on their local area to develop an ecological-based pastoral care? With the encyclical letter Laudato Si, Pope Francis started a reflection, provided a reflection, which has become inevitable, and this continues in the following encyclical letter. And this is the reason why, after 5 years since its publication, the Church itself has asked the Christian community to intensify every systematic project focusing always on Laudato Si, and we still wonder how has this document been received? What is the food for thought that is offered to us to develop a pastoral care about the safeguard of creation? What is the impact on local churches and on parish communities? What is the contribution for the formation of the future priests and candidates to consecrated life? What is the contribution that Laudato Si can do? My work in the research of pastoral care stems from these questions in order to bring about true theological reflection, to provide food for thought for theology, considering the importance of the ecological thinking of the Church based on a tradition that is understood and developed over time. It seems to me that I can see a logical and theological link between the theological question and the world around us. And so I focus much more on the question of ethics of relations. For this reason, I like very much focusing on the pastoral care of creation, not as a juxtaposition with the already developed theology of creation, but as a systematic adaptation. Now, this pathway has its ultimate goals in the following: generating a shift from theo-ecology to theo-eco-pastoral care, from theology of creation to pastoral care about creation. And it is of paramount importance that within the Church a new sensitivity is developed on the safeguard of creation. And we should be aware that natural creation, the earth, is a home, a common home, the place chosen by God to develop the mystery of incarnation of his Son that is still topical today, and it is in the places of the history of humanity that it finds its constant quality. In today's world, pastoral theology is called upon to make its contribution that should stem from exchange with sociology, biblical studies, moral and scientific disciplines. So there's a need to establish fruitful dialogue with a view to developing a project for theo-eco-pastoral care, maintaining that ecological theology not only focuses on ecological matters, but it's a way to renew Christian theology. What do we mean by ecological issue? Ecology includes many factors: the question of the climate, biodiversity, deforestation, water, pollution, technologies, relations. Those relations that the pandemic that we are living and now has highlighted even more. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis says, when we talk about the environment, we refer to a special relationship, the relationship between nature and society that lives on Earth. So man, the believer in God, is, of course, called upon to live out an ecological community. And this communion-based relationship will allow him to understand the duty he has to preserve the earth that should be catered for, the duty to breathe in pure air and drink unpolluted water, the need to live in a well-ordered earth, and the duty to live a better earth, a better planet to future generations, allowing the believer to live ecological care, being very careful to pollution, deforestation, the pondered use of technology, and careful use of the economy, and establish fruitful and productive relations. So how does the proclamation of the Church take part in this? What is the relationship that is suggested here? Ecopastoral theology has its ultimate goal to point to integral ecology, as is suggested by the Holy Father Pope Francis. For this reason, there's an urgent need of humanism that is based on many forms of logic, including the economic knowledge for a more integral and integrated vision. And so the Church is living the time for a new evangelization. As a matter of fact, as Paul VI maintained, it exists in order to evangelize. And in this evangelizing time, the pastoral pathway is introduced, the one we would like to develop. So a new language, a new style, a new method, new forms in a world that since quite some time has adopted new ways of living out the existence and understanding it. Technology, new fashions, Europe in crisis, Africa with migratory flows, the new fundamentalist strengths, a sort of populist mentality, run to armaments, weak economy for some, but stronger for others, a creation that has been almost destroyed and has been unattended. The pandemic, these are all the challenges of society, but these are all the realities the Church is confronted with in order to proclaim the gospel in a prophetic way, remaining positive. So there's a certain vision of reality and of creation. This is a new language. This is what pastoral theology would like to adopt a new language in order to sensitize Christian consciences. And there's a need to develop and implement a new approach, and ecology is a new form of language, a new way of exchanging, a new style in order to make projects. Now, my speech finds in the ambiguous concept of globalization its logical link, and so we need to understand its positive meaning. It should not be confined within a certain economy and degenerating politics. A global vision is imposed upon us, but as Pope Francis teaches us, we have to start off from the local area in order to get to the global. And here I skip all the quotations in order to get to my conclusions. With reference to this, it is interesting to see what Pope Francis says in his last encyclical letter that I would like to quote, because this is a new one. We have to look at the global, which makes us leave out the narrowness of what is in our house. And so the global makes us free, because it is as if the final cause attracting us to the plenitude. And we have to take the global dimension wholeheartedly, because it has something that the local has not. So the global vision using local eyes will help us, I'm adding my opinion, will help us to be at the service of the pastoral care, and will educate us to activate a new pastoral care, an ecopastoral theology, to get an intrinsic viewpoint of the local value of art, beauty, architecture, for harmony, being careful to all the parts. And this is what theo-ecological pastoral care has to focus on. Pastoral care of creation has as its ultimate goal to generate the capability of getting out of ourselves to go to the encounter of others. So we have to focus on the language, on the method, with a view to regaining Christian mystics that should not be disconnected from the lives of every human being, but centered on everyday experience. And this is the reason why it has to start off from local, territorial, pastoral realities, like parishes, for example. Ecology is founded on the mystics of transcendency, as Pope Francis stresses not only Laudato Si, but also in Evangelii Gaudium. As a matter of fact, on the basis of my theological, ecological, and pastoral reflection, there's this method of ecological pastoral discipline. And by way of conclusion, I should like to mention 5 words. These are the focal points of theological, ecological, pastoral care that is yet to be developed. Interdisciplinary exchange, ethics of relations, being coming with the proposals, local, global vision, and the culture of transcendence. Thank you very much. That was really interesting and stimulating, all the things that you've shared with us. You've taken us on a plan of beautiful in using this key of theology, ecology, pastoral care. You invite us to cater for the earth in order to give to future generations a healthy and livable environment. So you've taken us from theology, ecology, and pastoral care to mystics. You've even taken us back to mystics with a great attention. Well, there was an image that came up to my mind. It's an image used by Pope Francis, the fact of taking the hand on the local, on the territory, and taking a look to the global vision. So thank you very much for all the things you've shared with us. Thank you very much for your contribution. Now let's move on to the last speaker for this session, the last of our guests for this session, Professor Piero Benvenuti. I'm really honored to introduce you. Are you here? Are you connected? Well, yes, I am. And I can hear you well.
Laureato in fisica presso l'Università di Padova nel 70 e nello stesso anno inizia la sua attività di astronomo presso l'osservatorio di Assisi.
So he started his activity as an astronomer at the Padua University in 1973. He was assistant in Ottawa of Professor Eisenberg. In 1977, he moved to the Spatial Observatory of European Space Agency, and in 1982 he became a staff member of the European Space Agency, and he became the director of the Observatory of the International Ultraviolet Explorer Agency, a satellite for astronomy observations with a telescope of 45 centimeters, very sensitive to ultraviolet light, that was launched back in January 1978. In the period 1984-2003, he was the European scientific person in charge of projects with the cooperation between European Space Agency, NASA, and he was the director of the ESA Center for the Hubble Telescope at ESA Southern Observatory in Munich. In the period 1986-2005, he was a professor of astrophysics at the Department of Physical Sciences of the Cagliari University in Sardinia. In 2005, he moved to the University of Padua as ordinary professor of astrophysics for high energies. In the years 2022, he was responsible for many projects on the virtual telescope AVO, astrophysics virtual telescope funded by the European Commission. These included 2 projects funded by the European Commission. In 2002, he conducted a feasibility study on behalf of the European Commission for a program of grants for excellent people within the framework of the European research area. And in 2003, he was appointed extraordinary commissioner for the reform of the National Institute of Astrophysics. In 2004, he became the president for a period of 4 years. And in 2007, he retired and he came back to the University of Padua. In June 2007, he was appointed for a 5-year period as Chancellor for the administration of the Italian Space Agency. So be very patient, Professor, because these things are very beautiful. It is very beautiful to listen to your resume, because this allows us to understand the deepness not only of your knowledge, but also of your experience, So this is the reason why I'm reading all your resume. Amongst his interests, there's the study of the diffused satellite in the regions of star and in supernovas, and is active in IT applications in digital astrophysics. So he wants to disseminate the study of astronomy. He was director of astronomy sales, and he cooperates with the Corriere della Sera and the scientific news bulletin Leonardo. Is interested in rare diseases and his relationships with the American Association SOFT, and he contributed to developing an Italian division of it. He participated in writing the bill to earmark a part of a national fund of healthcare to safeguard the rights of people with the rare diseases, and for these people to see the costs of healthcare funded by the state. So thank you very much for being with us, and over to you, Professor.
Grazie.
Thank you for this extended presentation. I had sent a much shorter CV, but I would just like to underline the fact that my main interest is that of relating theology with science, because both can proceed together more effectively than separately, as unfortunately has happened in history. I thank the organizers of this meeting for having invited me to present a reading of Laudato Si', perhaps from a slightly different viewpoint, but equally important, which is that of science. Actually, this contribution of mine has been prepared in English, thinking about the international flavor of this meeting. I could do some simultaneous translation exercise, but in my paper there are some quotations, so this would complicate things. So I choose to continue my presentation in English. I would just like to underline before I begin that the point of view I wish to give is the link which I see between the deep, innovative dimension on revolutionary impact of Laudato Si' with the vision of contemporary cosmology gives us of reality, which is not only material reality of the cosmos, but also its spiritual contribution. So I will move on to English.
made clear by its subtitle on care for our common home, stands out, in my opinion, among all previous encyclicals, in that it is addressed not only to the Catholic or Christian communities, but to all people in the world who care about the future of our environment. The Laudato Si has indeed been received with great attention by many communities worldwide, quite independently from their religious belief and cultural heritage. This has been made very clear from the previous, by the previous speaker. However, the encyclical goes well beyond the common concept of ecology, which is normally concerned only with the protection of the material environment, the quality of the air, the preservation of forests and biodiversity, the availability of clean water to everybody, the control of anthropic activities that influence the climate change. All these issues has already been received attention by the international organization, as for example, the OECD Global Forum on Environment. In my opinion, the real novelty of the Laudato Si resides in the inclusion within the concept of ecology of the care for mankind, not as it were a separate entity from the material world, but as an integral part of the global cosmos. Indeed, the very incipit of the encyclical is recalling the well-known Cantico delle Creature by St. Francis. Praise be you, my Lord, for our sister Mother Earth, who feeds and governs us and produces various fruits and colored flowers and plants. It is really a revolutionary declaration that embraces everything in a cosmic brotherhood, the sun, the moon, the stars. Praise be you, my Lord, with all your creatures, especially our brother, Master Sun. Praise be you, my Lord, for Sister Moon and the stars. And this surprising declaration does not exclude our sister bodily death as an integral and essential feature of our presence in the world. Clearly, St. Francis did not consider the material and biological environment like stars, flowers and plants, birds and wolves as something external, different or less important than us. Everything in the created world shares the same dignity, which is not limited to entities, but also to the processes that, like from giving birth to our sister bodily death, constitute an essential component of the world. Following the inspirational thought of St. Francis, the encyclical implies, although not explicitly mentioned, the elimination of any drastic separation between matter and spirit, between the material world and its consciousness, the latter being represented by the emergence of humankind. This implication is made evident by the reference by Pope Francis to the visionary contribution of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, cited for the first time, at least to my knowledge, in a papal encyclical. Indeed, the spirit of the Laudato Si is perfectly aligned, I would dare to say, deeply rooted into the revolutionary vision of the world that has been unveiled by modern scientific cosmology. According to the latter vision, the main characteristic of our universe is its unitary evolution, a path that scientists have been able to describe for a period that dates back 13.8 billion years ago up to the current era. During this very long history, our universe underwent a continuous evolution characterized by very different phases, from an initial almost undifferentiated mixture of elementary particles and electromagnetic radiation towards the formation of the first stars and galaxies, which represent an essential step for enriching the chemistry of the cosmic milieu. All the chemical elements that we are made for have been cooked inside the stars. We are really stardust. out of which this new star, from this new milieu, the new stars were born. And this includes a number of planets orbiting them. Because we know for sure now, because of scientific evidence, that around any star we see in the sky, around them there is a system, a planetary system similar to our own. And some of these exoplanets, as they have been now dubbed, have characteristics that resembles those of our Mother Earth. We know by our own experience here and existence that at least on the planet we live in, our sister and Mother Earth, the above-mentioned unitary cosmic evolution proceeded locally with what we call the biological evolution. There is a close connection between the evolution of the universe and the biological evolution that we observe on Earth. And this evolution on Earth eventually led to the emergence of the self-conscious mankind. Now, if we match our earthly experience, the experience we have here, with what we have learned recently about the evolution of the cosmos, we have to admit that the hypothesis that the same evolutionary path we have observed on our Earth happen or will happen also on some of the billions of planets in the universe. This hypothesis is becoming more and more plausible. Of course, we should leave to the scientific investigation the burden to make this hypothesis more credible. But meanwhile, we should start reflecting on the consequences that this new cosmic vision entails upon us. The most important consequence is that there is no separation or distinction anymore between the cosmos and ourselves. We, with our material body and our consciousness, are an integral part of the evolving universe. From a Christian perspective, this means that the creation cannot anymore consider an event fixed in space and time, but it is an ever-continuing process which is unrolling in time and it is not yet completed. Indeed, St. Thomas Aquinas already warned us that the creation cannot be considered an event happening only once, and introduced the concept of creatio continua, an atemporal continuous action by God that keeps the whole reality into existence. Of course, St. Thomas could not imagine in his time that his concept of creatio continua should be now extended to be a continuous process that not only keeps the reality into existence, but tends toward the future completion of God's desire. Indeed, we saw that the long cosmic path has driven what we used to call the inanimate matter towards the spirit, the consciousness. Therefore, the traditional distinction body-soul that we inherited from the Greek philosophers has certainly to be revisited. But the evolution and therefore the creation, if the evolution and therefore the creation is not yet complete, what would be the final destination of this cosmic path? Science alone cannot answer this question, but we know, or better, we believe, because it has been revealed to us by Jesus of Nazareth, that we, together with the cosmos, are moving towards the realization of the kingdom of heavens, toward a universal Christification, as Teilhard de Chardin loved to call it. And here is the perfect link with the Laudato Si. Section 83 reads, "The ultimate destiny of the universe is in the fullness of God, which has already been attained by the risen Christ, the measure of the maturity of all things." Here we can add yet another argument for rejecting every tyrannical and irresponsible domination of human beings over other creatures. The ultimate purpose of other creatures is not to be found in us. Rather, all creatures are moving forward with us and through us toward a common point of arrival, which is God, in that transcendent fullness where the risen Christ embraces and illumines all things. Human beings endowed with intelligence and love and drawn by the fullness of Christ are called to lead all creatures back to their Creator. In this context, Pope Francis is absolutely right in reminding us that we were endowed with intelligence and love. The fact that our rational power has allowed us to discover the evolutionary characteristic of the universe, as well as its mechanisms, make us co-responsible for its future. In other words, we have become co-creators. We can direct, at least on our Earth, the global evolution. I insist, the evolution of matter and spirit together. And we are leading this global evolution toward its future. Now, this has become a tremendous responsibility. The future, not only of the mankind and its earthly environment, but symbolically of the entire cosmos. We are the conscience of the cosmos, is literally in our hands. And the time is ripe. I would say the kairos has come. We cannot wait or hesitate anymore. Consider, for example, what is happening with the OGM, the genetic modified organisms. An outcome which the natural unconscious evolution, to call it that way, might eventually have achieved in millions of years, it is now realized by us using our scientific knowledge and technological skills in matters of years or months. What should be our guiding principle in driving the evolution this way? And should we put limits to the process, taking into account that the long-term consequences are difficult to predict? If we want to be considered real co-creators, aligning our action to the aim of the Pantocrator, we may read back and consider profoundly the prophetic verses of Genesis 1:24. You remember when Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden after having eaten the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. At that point, they believed they could distinguish the good from evil in their decision. God expelled them from the garden, and at the east of the Garden of Eden, he placed the cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. Now, today, maybe the cherubim fell asleep, or the sword had its flame extinguished, but how can we call today's genetic manipulation anything else as an attempt to the very roots of the tree of life, the too often forgotten second tree in the Garden of Eden? But apart from this responsibility we are taking now for the material evolution, let me mention a more subtle parallel evolution, which is not yet perceived as such. And this is happening through the global communication networking. The fast technological progress in this field is generating phenomena that go well beyond their initially planned purposes. We have seen already how our collective conscience can be influenced by the increasing connectivity. But this is just the first step toward a globalization of consciences. Consider the deployment of the huge amount, tens of thousands of communication satellites that are already being deployed in low Earth orbit. Their main declared purpose is to provide web connectivity all over the world. In principle, a very useful technological progress. However, what is not being sufficiently highlighted is that the latency of this type of communication, that is, the time a signal takes to reach us from the space web, will be in the range of milliseconds, which is similar to the speed of neurons transmission in our brain. Now, match this data with the possibility recently proposed to implant a chip in our brain so that it will be continuously connected to the World Wide Web. Now, is this the first step toward the realization of the noosphere, the prophetical vision that Teilhard had when the web was not even dreamed? If this is the case, how can we drive this different but equally important evolution in such a way it represents a real progress toward the Christification of the world. In both cases, our responsibility as cosmic consciousness, or from a Christian perspective, as co-creators, is brought to play. We cannot anymore look the other way. And the Laudato Si is shaking the conscience of all people of goodwill, urging them to act. But how should we act? The answer has been given a few days ago by Pope Francis with his new encyclical Fratelli Tutti, all brothers, which is indeed, in his own words, the logical extension of the Laudato Si. Unconditional love for everyone and everything in the created cosmos is the key. Only if we bend our intelligence and all our knowledge and skills to unconditional love, love that makes no distinction whatsoever, we may be considered the real co-creators, aiming to the promised realization of the kingdom of heavens. Thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie professore di questo bellissimo intervento che ci ha portato dall'infinitamente.
Thank you, Professor, for this intervention, which has brought us from the infinitely small to the infinitely large, from St. Francis, who was the smallest, considered himself the smallest, to beyond the stars. I think we have 10 minutes at this point for our dialogue section, community dialogue session. We have received a range of questions, and I am certain that our Valentina is ready, and she will read our question, and our four professors will be able to respond. In my view, their contribution has been very significant, and I think they have helped us to see not only that everything is linked up, but also, as the Pope said, that all of us are linked together, so all things and all people. And they have brought us to create, to bridge that gap in our minds, not to keep everything from everyone distinct, so environment and people, and I believe that this is crucially important. And the message of the Pope said that in Laudato Si we take on a relational vision of humanity and the stewardship of our world, linked to the human person and to our environment, where we are, where we live. Therefore, this human relationship is linked with the environment in which we link. Valentina is ready, I believe, with the questions.
So thank you very much for very interesting presentations. We've received a lot of questions. Now, we have these questions are for all speakers. Ecological conversion requires a great effort in the field of education, and we have to involve the youngest generations. How do you see this challenge from your monitoring sense? Misinformation, lack of information, these are the basis of few negationist or other theories. How can we be winning in disseminating the right knowledge about facts? Thomas Insua started from a global perspective, and Father Onofrio from a local prospect. How can we make a link between these two prospects? Then we have many questions for Brother Onofrio. If you could share with us a few experiences about this proposal of ecological pastoral care, and better explain how to move to ecological and pastoral theology, because there's a need for it. Now the question is, I believe that there's a need to transform also catechesis, starting from this ecological prospect. How can we renew the way of educating children on the way to Christianism, bearing in mind this vision of the care of common home, of our common home? These are questions that would need a lot of time, and unfortunately we do not have enough time here. So we should like to ask you to be very brief. So we ask every speaker to spend a few words and provide sources that you may consult later on, or to remain in contact with us. So later on, there will be a possibility to answer off the mail or using other means to your questions, because, of course, we do not have enough time here to answer all these questions in a proper manner. So another 5 minutes. So 5:05, we have to stop for the break. So 2 minutes each. And we start with Father Josh. Over to you, Father Josh. I will be speaking Italian this time. Well, I think that the educational change has to be understood 360 degrees. Education as a cultural formation to culture. Today's world is the fruit of the cultural paradigm of modernity. So we see that there are things to be used and others to be thrown away, and other to be exploited. How to shift it to a new cultural paradigm? There are many dimensions. Education, and this is part of spirituality, catechesis, theology, and these are things that we have already mentioned. Then there's economics, there's politics at many levels. But I confirm that there's this challenge of education to be taken up in a wider context. So education as a way to shift our paradigm. And I have to say that this is a huge challenge, and we need to be helped by economists, politicians, educators, religious men and women, and young people as well. They are guiding this transformation. So we need everybody. Laudato Si in number 14 says that each one, using their talents, their skills, may give a contribution. And so everybody is involved in this pathway, all brothers. Thank you very much, Father Josh. And Thomas, you have 2 minutes. So we received so many questions. I will be focusing on two main aspects, considering the time I have available. So, alongside with this, Father Josh said about education, I should like to add something that seems to be interesting to me. So we have to focus on education of children, but not only children, of adults as well. Because children and young people have a lot to teach to adults. And clearly enough, there's an awareness about this crisis. And young people are more aware than adults of the risks of this pandemic, of this crisis. So I want to be provocative here. On the other question, local and global. Well, I like this question very much. I'd say that it is interesting to think of the ecological movement has this slogan, global plus local. And this challenge it's both together, not a juxtaposition between the two. We, from the World Climate Movement, we focus on the importance of acting on both local and global action for this ecological conversion, for this transformation. This must be at both levels. We have to be connected. We have to cooperate at a global level, because this is a global challenge, and so everybody has to be part of this and has to work. At the same time, we need a global plan. We have the Paris Agreement, a global, so we need a global plan also within the Church. Next year there will be the proclamation, the announcement of these Laudato Si plans developed by the Vatican. At global level, these plans are very important, but then the action has to be taken at a local level. So this crisis can only be solved if we take actions locally. So we have to put together the local and the global. So thank you very much, Thomas. Frau Onofrio, you have 2 minutes speaking time. Well, yes, these exchanges we are having allow us to understand that everything is connected. So we have to start off from the local. In my understanding, and this is the effort made by pastoral theology, is to start off from the local, the parish. It's the first environment. It's the first local environment for Christians, for them to have the opportunity of grow. It is within the Church that we can take up a new cultural and educational challenge. Let me just talk about 2 experiences I activated. One is the Laudato Si school. It's a parish school. It's the first, if I'm not wrong. It's the first one in Italy, if I'm not wrong, in an Italian parish in Calabria region. So starting off from the local, from the parish, involving both adults and children for a pathway of Laudato Si according to the style of Laudato Si, to educate to new habits and lifestyles. And the other one, for example, it is for consecrated life, and I will be publishing a text in a while. So we have to start off from the local, from consecrated life in communities of religious men and women, and how they can introduce new habits and new lifestyles. So we have to start off from what is concrete, and Pope Francis says so in Laudato Si. So if we start off from a concrete level, then we can make advocacy at a global level, at a political level. So this local dimension is of paramount importance, and it starts off with the community of parishioners. And this is what John Paul II was reminding in Evangelii Gaudium. He was asking of changing lifestyles, methods, forms of catechesis, based on what already exists, but accepting new sensitivities. So thank you very much. Professor Benvenuti, you too, you have 2 minute speaking time. Thank you very much. I can see that there are many questions in the chat on my presentation. I will just answer this separately, because otherwise 2 minutes is not enough. It's a provocation I want to launch. I fully agree on the fact that we have to start off from education and involve everybody, and involve namely children. They have to think in terms of a global ecology. When I say so, it means as I tried to say in my presentation, it's not only to be focused on the material part of the environment, but also on the spiritual part of the environment. Now, the appeal have to launch is strengthened by Laudato Si in the educational pathway, in the catechesis of children. We have to replace Genesis 1 with the reading of the Song of Creatures. So the message is the same, but the effect is completely different. Why? Because the Song of Creatures goes to the very art of creation. Genesis 1 must be interpreted. It's a symbolical story telling that needs to be interpreted, and at school age there's not this capability of interpreting science. If you read Genesis 1, you read something that the 5-year-old, 6-year-old child considers as a true story instead of of considering it a symbolic story. So why don't we seize this opportunity of the encyclical letter, and instead of telling about creation using Genesis, but we use Laudato Si and Song of Creatures. I think that this will be revolutionary, and will be having young people committed to protecting creation, not only in material terms, but saving their spirits. We see that all young children are with smartphones in their hands to consult Google, the web, and we have to take this within the framework of integral ecology. This is the provocation I would like to launch in the 2-minute speaking time that is accorded to me. So I can say, we can say thank you to all of us, all of you, for all the things we've listened to in this half afternoon, in this couple of hours. And I think that we have also stressed this wholehearted appeal by the Pope, not to be to stop here, but to get always enriched, and to go back constantly the debate on the ecology. It should not just remain a debate made up of words, but it should take us to a transformational action. So thank you all, and we'll be meeting again. Over to Valentina for the time. So thank you very much. On behalf of the EcoOne Commission, thank you. We thank our speakers and the contributions they've made. With a few minutes break, and at 6 sharp, 6 p.m., we'll be resuming the streaming with Antonino Pugliese. He will be moderating the next session. So thank you to all the participants who've been connected with us. More than 400 people connected, so we're very happy about that. And we'll be online. Please be punctual, and we're going to resume at 6 p.m. sharp.